What do you do when your class has 21 kids on the roster, but only 3 show up on time? Do you lose your mind? Do you quit? Or do you reinvent how learning works? Today's guest, Rob Barnett, was ready to walk away during year 1. But instead of walking out, he built a model that made him fall in love with teaching again. It's not fancy. No, it doesn't require a tech degree. And no, it's not another scripted curriculum from central office. It's real, it's human, and it works, especially when kids are behind, distracted, or just trying to survive. In this episode, you're going to learn why giving up whole class instruction might be the best thing you can do, how Rob used Skype. Yep, the Skype that we used to use a decade ago to build a self-paced mastery-based classroom, what the InstaleLesson AI tool can do in 5 minutes that used to take teachers hours of planning, and how the modern classroom project is helping 100,000 plus educators worldwide ditch one-size-fits-all teaching and really do school different. If you ever wished your staff meetings focused more on solutions than slogans, or if you're tired of watching teachers burn out from trying to be everything to everyone, this one's for you. I'm Danny Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional system, so that you create a campus experience worth showing up for. And as I mentioned, today's guest is Rob Barnett. He co-founded the Modern Classrooms Project, which has empowered so many educators around the world in 180 plus countries to meet every learner's needs. He's a former public school teacher and the author of Meet Every Learner's Needs, Redesigning Instruction so all learners can succeed. He hopes his children will learn in a modern classroom someday. Thanks to Ruckus Makers, just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of all shows worldwide. So thank you so much for pressing play and engaging with the content. That AI tool, the InstaleLesson, which is free to access, by the way. Rob does a demo during today's episode. And so if you're listening, which is fine, we explicitly describe what's going on in the demo. But if you'd like to see it with your own eyes, check out, our YouTube channel or Ruckus Makers on Substack. I have the video in both those places. So thanks again for listening. We'll be back in just a second after a message from our show sponsors. Looking to create the kind of campus experience students never forget? ODP Business Solutions transforms ordinary spaces into extraordinary learning environments. Visit odpbusiness.com/education and let's do school different. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Education is broken, but you're here to fix it. Get the only leadership newsletter designed for rebels, innovators, and ruckus makers. Our paid Substack gives you tools to disrupt the system, not reproduce what doesn't work. When you subscribe, you'll read each week the Reframe, Mindset Shifts in 90 Seconds or Less, .ai, which are supercharged AI prompts and custom GPTs, the Mediocre Educators Hub, where the onion meets education and what could go wrong there, and First in Line, exclusive content, all our best stuff before it hits the bookshelf, and more. And for listeners of this Ruckus cast, we have a very special offer. When you go to ruckusmakers.media/awesome, you'll get 50% off your first year annual subscription to the Ruckus Maker Substack. So go to ruckusmakers.media/awesome to get started today. If you could differentiate instruction in 20 minutes or less, would you do it for all your students? Well, you can with IXL. Over 1 million teachers use IXL because it empowers them to use effective data-informed instruction. And you can get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right. And Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, Danny, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to start with a story about being a teacher on the verge of quitting, but you stuck around. So can you share that?
Sure. Yeah, that was me for most of my first year teaching. What I really remember is I was a high school math teacher
Yeah.
and I had this first period class, pre-calculus, and there were 21 students on the roster. And some days, especially when we got, into the winter, some days at the opening bell, I'd have 3 kids in the room. Maybe by the end of class, I'd have 10 or 15. And those were the extreme days. But
Yeah.
most days I had, 10, 12 kids in the room at the start, maybe 15 by the end. And so you have students coming in during class, students missing class. And I just thought to myself, this is impossible. Like, how can I help all these students learn? How can I challenge the kids who are here every day, who can make it to school and are getting everything and want to move on? How can I help those students stay on track, even if they're arriving late? How can I help absent students catch up? And this was before COVID, by the way. So I think,
Yeah.
things are only worse now, but it was just like, how do I do this? That what I had been taught, which was sort of stand at the board and give a great sort of lesson with the whole class all at once. It just wasn't going to work. And I was so profoundly frustrated. I did
Yeah.
every morning think, what am I doing here?
Yeah. I feel even stress bubbling up in me as you described that scenario. So that was tough. But I think, during that time, you kind of figured out a model, like correct me anywhere I'm wrong, but figured out kind of a model that helped you fall in love with teaching again. And so can you explain, what that model is?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that first period math class was extreme, but actually every class I had, I realized had sort of the same fundamental challenge. Like some students show up to class, they have grade level skills, they're ready to go. They want to be pushed and they're really prepared to learn. Other students show up, they have gaps in what they know. It's through no fault of their own, but they're behind grade level. They feel lost, they feel confused, they doubt themselves. And some students aren't there or they're distracted and you're just not getting their full attention, every single day. And as a teacher, you got to figure out, how do I meet these learners' diverse needs? And I think I
Mm.
realized during that first year, I can't give one lesson that's going to meet every learner's needs at once. It just wasn't possible. So yeah, I did start doing things a different way. I started taking my direct instruction, in other words, what I would explain from the front of the room. I
Mhm.
recorded very simple videos of that. I would
Mhm.
literally get on a Skype call with myself. I think Skype is no longer with us, but I'd start a Skype call with myself. I'd hit the record button. I'd explain something. That was my video. Now students can watch that in class or at home. They can pause, they can rewind, they can rewatch, they can watch with their family. They can ask me questions one-on-one in class. I'm spending my time in class answering questions, working with kids in small groups, kind of checking in to see how they're doing. Students are advancing at their own paces. So those students who are ready to move fast are moving fast. Those students who need more time have it. Those students who were absent on Monday sort of come in and pick up where they left off. And I could provide each learner the support they needed. And then I think the most important thing was I could really make sure students understood lesson one before they move on to lesson two. In math, but really in every subject, that's so important. Requiring mastery, requiring understanding. Our students are capable of understanding things at a really high level if we give them the time and support to do that. Sometimes we rush them through at our own pace. It doesn't work. What this sort of approach let me do is spend time getting to know my students, working closely with my students, and making sure they could understand it. And my students, they started to see, okay, yeah, you're right. I came late today or I missed class the other day, but Mr. Barnett's got materials for me. He's going to help me learn this. And actually, I am capable of learning this if I have the right sort of structure in place.
Yeah, and they had belief then, you had belief in them, you had the support and the tools, and then that transferred to students. You're mentioning Skype. I'm smiling because that's 10 years ago. That's how I started recording these podcasts, right? Then it was Zoom. Now we're using Riverside, but whatever, technology changes. So thanks for bringing me down that path. And with that model, so were you recording the lessons and then sort of answering questions in real time based on students, gaps, frustrations, obstacles that they encountered and that kind of thing. What was it about this model that really supported your teaching, right? And made it fun again or made you love it or less difficult than year one.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned all these technologies, right? The platform doesn't matter and it doesn't need to
Yeah,
be sophisticated. Like people
right.
hear about tech in the classroom and it can sound intimidating. It's not. I used what I was comfortable with. It was a very
Yeah,
small part of class. It was a 10 or 5 minute video for students to watch. And then the rest of class is students working together, me working with my students. So this wasn't like a super high tech thing. This was just using technology to replace one part of the lesson, which was that direct instruction. That was really difficult for me to give live because some students were bored, others were lost, others weren't there at all. But to answer your actual question, I didn't become a teacher because I wanted to be the dictator of a classroom, standing at the board and commanding attention. I became a teacher because I wanted to work closely with young people. I wanted to get to know them. I wanted to teach them things so they actually understood and help them develop their own self-confidence and self-esteem. And I wasn't able to do that when I was standing at the board frustrated. Once I once I had my instruction on these videos and students were moving at their own paces and had the time to achieve mastery, it was kind of like, I don't have to show up and give this performance. I'm going to show up and just help my students learn. I'm going to sit with them. I'm going to
Mm,
get to know them. I'm going to check in with them and they're going to learn. And they did learn. And there's this old saying, students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think
right.
that's really true. The question is, how do you show them how much you care? And if you're spending your days trying to manage the room, police behavior, that's really hard. If you
Mm,
can sit down with your students during class, engage them, they see it right away. And I found, by the way, the best classroom management strategy is keeping every student appropriately challenged and appropriately supported every day. When kids come in and realize they can be successful and they're going to have the support they need, there's no misbehavior or acting up, right? They want to succeed as much as we do. They just need the
mm,
conditions to do that.
yeah, that's great. So send that foundation, that environment where students could thrive, right? And you saw your discipline problems erased. Only thing I'd add to that is I realized in my own teaching experience when I didn't escalate situations because I had stuff going on in the inside, right? And some would happen in class, I'd take it personal or whatever. There was a moment that I gave all that up, right? And stopped taking things personally and escalating. And after that, I never wrote up a kid again, right? And so I've told this story a million times, but the bottom line to the story is I would just use these very middle of the road kind of responses, right? And therefore, I would never like quote unquote bite the hook. If the student was fishing for a reaction from me, it just wasn't going to happen anymore. And they actually couldn't believe it. They would say, "Oh, you're the worst teacher ever," and I'd say, "Probably true, right?" And they said, "What do you mean, probably true? You're agreeing that you're the worst? Yeah, that's okay. Can we move on and do the lesson?" And once I started doing that, like I said, all the discipline for me was erased as well. So that appropriate challenge piece, I really appreciate that. Let's talk to the
Yeah, I
ruckus
would.
makers. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I would say, yeah, I used to get into all of these behavior showdowns, right? I'm trying to
Okay.
explain
You did too.
something.
All right.
Someone is lost or bored and they're acting out
Mm,
just because they're lost or bored, right? Like, I understand why students behave that way. They're not bad kids. They're just, the class isn't meeting their needs. And we get into this showdown in front of the class and it was miserable. But
yeah.
once you stop teaching in that way, the kid comes in and something is wrong. Like, you just walk up to them and sit down and say, "Hey, how you doing? Like, how can I help you today?" It just totally changes the whole dynamic of the class. And instead
Mm,
of the rest of the class sitting there hostage to this showdown, everyone else is just working, right? Maybe I need to pull the young person out into the hall and say, "Let's talk for a couple minutes, take a little
mm,
break, calm down." That happens. That's fine.
mm,
It
mm.
wasn't so disruptive. So yeah, that really resonates with me. Sorry to interrupt your question.
No, no. I'm glad you added that context. I also like the language, the showdown. I don't know that I've ever heard it called that before, but it's totally what it is. And it's almost like bring me to your classroom. That's now a Western movie, and you can hear all the showdown sort of music around it. But the thing is that it's endlessly entertaining. I think for a lot of kids too, which is why it's so bad to get to bite the hook and to fall into that trap. Okay, but But yeah, let's get back to kind of your work. I was thinking as you were sharing about the context, for students to succeed, and then sort of the model, that worked for you and helped you fall in love with teaching. The ruckus maker who's watching or listening to this, let's say, oh, I want to see that in my classrooms, right? But teachers aren't currently doing that. Maybe they're more the sage on the stage and still really lecture based and so on and so forth. So, any tips for that ruckus maker in terms of how do you make some of those shifts on campus where teachers can embrace that model you're talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. First of all, I would say I commend you for thinking about how things can be different. There's so much inertia in our system. And I think
Yeah.
we hear sometimes about these ideas, blended learning, self-paced learning, mastery-based learning. They sound really good in theory. How do you actually do them? How do you put them into practice? And I have two suggestions. The first is that, I wasn't the only teacher at my school to have this issue. I had a colleague named Kareem Farah. He taught downstairs from me, and we realized he saw what I was doing. He started to do the same thing. We realized we have something worth sharing. And so we founded an organization called the Modern Classrooms Project, which helps teachers adopt this model in their own classroom. We've reached about 100,000 teachers all over the world, and we are a nonprofit. So we have all of our materials, our resources, our description of our model is free online at learn.modernclassrooms.org. And we just want to help any teacher anywhere, any leader anywhere understand how do you make the transition I made? How do you record a video? How do you manage a self-paced classroom? How do you assess that students are ready to move on from lesson 1 to lesson 2? And so we have sort of a whole training and framework on that. And I just encourage anyone to explore that. The second thing I'd share is that I've also learned over the years of working with all these teachers that doing that first lesson, that first sort of mastery-based lesson, can be really hard to do, and it can be scary to do that. And so I've recently built an AI tool that's called InstaleLesson that helps teachers create that first blended, self-paced, mastery-based lesson. And what it does is it's a kind of a thought partner for the teacher using AI, where you put in the topic of the lesson, and InstaleLesson will help you find what's a good video from YouTube, what's a vetted video that can help your students understand this question. And then after the students watch the video, what are the key points they need to take away? How can they apply what they've learned? And then how can they demonstrate their mastery? And so I think we have this sort of comprehensive approach through the Modern Classrooms Project. And then there's this AI tool called InstaleLesson that helps teachers get started right away, take 3 minutes, 5 minutes, create a blended mastery-based lesson and go for it. And for me, this whole sort of process in my classroom and the Modern Classrooms Project, it just started with trying to do a single lesson differently, a single lesson better, and it built up from there. So, if you're a school leader and you're thinking, I want my teachers to do this, what I want to say to you is there are free tools out there. There's a professional development course. There's an AI tool that you can give your teachers and say, hey, check this out, try it. It was built by teachers. I think it can work for you. It doesn't cost you anything to try. Give it a shot. And I hope that there will be teachers who will take it and run with it. I know there are thousands already who have and who are discovering that joy of teaching again. Like, I'm spending my days working closely with students and watching them achieve mastery. So yeah, I hope those are actionable tools that sort of put my big talk principles into practice.
Well, I love how accessible it is, right? And so we'll link out both those websites, the InstaleLesson and the resources that the Modern Classroom Project, we'll link them up in the show notes. But I also really appreciate, your approach. The Ruckus Maker might have noticed when we first started talking about tech, you said the platform doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be like, super robust or, with all the crazy bells and whistles, just getting started. And essentially, what you were talking about right there too is like, what's the one lesson you can experiment with, and try it out. So it's not that, okay, you got 8 classes, 9 classes, 7, whatever. Like, you got to do all the preps for every lesson this way forever and ever. Try it once, see what happens, and what'd you learn about yourself and your teaching and that kind of thing. And then keep noodling on that. So I really, really appreciate that approach. Before the break, I would like to ask you, so the Ruckus Maker is okay. I'll point the teachers to these lessons, to these resources, AI tool. But will my school now turn chaotic? Will the classes now become, you know, totally a mess? And what would you say to the Ruckus Maker if they're thinking that?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I think you've got my approach exactly right. Like, I want people to make a big ruckus. I want to get rid of age-based education, and I want, a different
Mm,
system that really pushes every student towards competency. That's the huge end sort of game, but
shift.
that's going to
Yeah.
happen one lesson at a time, one classroom at a time, one teacher at a time. I just think that's how change is going to happen. So that's certainly our approach: is give your teachers something to make a small ruckus, in your
Mm,
in your next lesson. In terms of this idea of chaos, I do think teachers sometimes feel a little hesitant to give up control of the classroom. We're trained to be the masters of our domain and control everything that happens in the classroom, but I don't know that that's really what great learning looks like. And if I think about my life, I haven't usually learned a lot by following instructions and being told exactly what to do. I need a little bit of freedom and autonomy with clear structure in order to learn. I describe the modern classroom sort of like a college library. You walk
mm,
into a college library or a study hall, you have some students working by themselves. Maybe they're watching a video or taking notes or taking the end of lesson mastery check. You have a lot of learners sitting in groups and working together. And yeah, that can get a little bit loud if you have four groups of students all working on different lessons at the same time. Good learning, I think, is loud. It involves conversation, it involves discussion, it involves collaboration. It's not everyone doing the exact same thing at the same time. And then you have a teacher walking around and understanding, okay, this group is on lesson 2. They need me to do a quick mini lesson so they can catch up and get on track. This group's on lesson 4. They're ahead of pace. They're advanced. They need me to come in here and really push them and give them a challenge. That can be, that's an adjustment for a teacher who's used to just one lesson per day. But I think it's much more productive for students and it's more fun for teachers because you don't have to stand up there and think, oh God, well, I'm explaining this, but I know these kids already got it. I know these kids are lost. And I know these kids are absent. And that's so frustrating. In a modern classroom,
mm.
yes, maybe it's a little bit chaotic, but every student's appropriately challenged every day because they're just picking up at the next point in their learning progression. And you can provide every student the support they need. So embrace, if you want to make a ruckus, you have to embrace the chaos a little bit.
Yeah, and that's what we think when we're talking about do school difference, making shifts from old broken traditional ways of educating to new, different, and creative. And you only get that way by trying new stuff, right? And reinventing yourself, evolving, so on and so forth. And so I think checking out your resources, the AI tool, and after the break, I think we'll talk a little bit about the book, Meet Every Learner's Needs, redesigning instructions so all students can succeed. These are all your playbooks, so to speak, if you want to make some of these shifts. All right, so we're just going to take a quick break to get a message in from our sponsors. But when we get back, Rob's going to show us that InstaleLesson AI tool, which he previewed to me when we did our intro call. And I'm glad he agreed to, show the Ruckus Maker who's watching. And if you're just listening, you're in your car, maybe doing the dishes or whatever, make sure to explicitly describe what's going on so that you still feel like you're watching along with us. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Now, picture this: a learning environment so engaging students forget to check their phones. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what we helped Belago Academy create. Their secret? Working with ODP Business Solutions to build collaborative spaces that actually work. We didn't just deliver furniture, we delivered a completely new way of learning. From tech integration that makes lessons come alive, to flexible spaces that adapt to any teaching style, to sustainable solutions that reduce your carbon footprint. We're here to help you do school different. And the best part, you get it all from a single supplier. all to help you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Traditional professional development is broken. Districts spend $18 billion a year on leadership development that most principals find disconnected, unhelpful, and honestly forgotten by next Monday. The Ruckus Maker Mastermind flips the model. Instead of top-down lectures, we give you weekly coaching, peer-to-peer mentorship, and we help you solve your number one challenge every single week, starting the week that you join. We don't teach from a manual, something that reproduces the past, an old, broken, and traditional system. No, we teach you to innovate. We teach you leadership. We teach you how to do school different. You can apply now and join the only leadership community built for Ruckus Makers. And this application takes 3 minutes to complete. Go to betterleadersbetterschools.com/apply and supercharge your leadership this year within the mastermind. That's betterleadersbetterschools.com/apply. As a school leader, time is your greatest resource, and there is a real sense of urgency when it comes to getting students what they need right now. That's why I love IXL's Universal Screener. In 20 minutes or less, you can identify students in need of intervention. And IXL's Learning Adaptive platform makes differentiating instruction easy. As students learn, IXL adjusts to the right level of difficulty for each individual student. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, and we're back with Rob Barnett, and he's over at the Modern Classroom Project, co-founder there. We're talking about his book, Meet Every Learner's Needs, Redesigning Instruction so All Students Can Succeed. And I asked Rob if he'd be kind enough to demo the InstaleLesson AI tool that he's built, and he agreed. So we are going to check that out and describe, what we're seeing in case you're just listening. But if you're watching, obviously, you'll see all the wonderful stuff. Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Danny. Happy to share this. And I will talk through exactly what I'm doing. Part of the purpose of creating InstaleLesson was to create a tool that feels really simple, that walks teachers through the process and helps teachers through the process of creating that blended, self-paced, mastery-based lesson. So all we really need to get started is the topic of a lesson. Danny, do you want to just choose a topic of a lesson for me here?
Sure. Let's go to the Revolutionary War.
All right, great. And what grade level should this lesson be for?
My first year teaching, I did sixth grade. So
Sixth grade.
you were talking about your first year teaching. Let's go to sixth grade.
Great.
Oh, it's already there too. So that's perfect.
Yeah, that's the default is right in the middle, but we can do anything from kindergarten to adult. If there's a learning standard, Common Core or state standard, it's easy to put it in here to align the lesson to that topic. But all you need is a topic and a grade level. So I'm going to click on a button that says, help me refine the lesson. And the first thing that AI is going to do is come up with a learning objective. Why don't I read what it created? It says, I can identify one important person from the Revolutionary War and explain their role. How's that strike you, Danny, as a learning objective?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's pretty clear. It's very clear in terms of what you want the student to do.
Great. Yeah. And this is fully editable, by the way. So if I wanted to change it, I could say the causes of the Revolutionary War. You want to do that instead? The causes of the Revolutionary War?
Yeah. I'd like to see what happens when we do that.
So I just edit it right here. Now, the next step that InstaleLesson takes is it's going to scour YouTube to find what are the best videos that meet this learning objective. And behind the scenes, we've got a lot of criteria here to explain what makes for a good instructional video. How do you tell if it's reliable? What channels are vetted channels to explain content? And this, can take 30 seconds, but the idea is to find a few different videos on the topic that can replace that direct instruction component of your lesson. So right now, there are 3 videos here recommended by our algorithm that address this learning objective, causes of the Revolutionary War. And if you have a video you like, by the way, you can just copy the link in here from YouTube and use that instead. Just on a quick look, Danny, without having looked at any of these, does one of them stand out to you?
I like the top choice just because I think students, well, it's a little long, so that's the concern, 19 minutes, but I like that it's animated, right? An animated battle map I could see students finding interesting.
Okay.
And by the way, while it was processing, I really loved all the phrases, right? Searching for age appropriateness, aligning the standards, getting sidetracked by cat videos. That's a real nice touch. And that's just kind of like a micro moment in what you built. But I want to, just highlight that for a second for the Ruckus Maker, because we take so much stuff for granted, right? That people just like show up on campus and it's their job and they should be happy and fulfilled and all that kind of stuff. And what your Insta lesson showed, even as it was loading and thinking, that made it engaging, entertaining. I was waiting to see what the next line would say, right? And so just I guess the level of thought that you put into the whole experience is really wonderful. And the Ruckus Maker can learn from that. All right. Sorry to sidetrack us, back to you.
No, thanks for pointing that out. And this on the one hand is a lesson creation tool. It's also a teaching tool, I think. When you go through the process of lesson creation, you're learning about the elements of this style of lesson, right? A good lesson starts with the learning objective. From there, you have a video that provides the direct instruction. The video needs to meet certain criteria. It shouldn't be too long. I agree, 19 minutes could be on the longer side, but if it seems like an engaging video, great. And then we'll sort of continue step by step through this process. So the next step is to identify key points from the video. And what AI does here is it looks through the video, it looks at the objective, the standard, if you've inputted it, and says, what are the 3 key points that students need to understand about the causes of the Revolutionary War? We now have 3 statements that are fill in the blank statements. So the idea is, watching a video shouldn't be a totally passive experience. Students should be taking notes and filling in the key points. It's more engaging while they watch. It also gives them something after they watch the video to go back to, like notes or a study guide with key points. So, I'll read the first key point just for people listening. It says, the Revolutionary War began because American colonists were being taxed by the British without having any blank in the British government. This was known as no blank without blank. So I imagine they didn't have any representation in the British government. There was no taxation without representation. That strikes me as a pretty key point behind the Revolutionary War. You're looking at all 3 key points here, Danny. How do they look to you?
Yeah, I think they're good. The second one talks about battles in the beginning. And number 3, American colonies declaring their independence. So on the date and what the document was called. So I think pretty age appropriate. And like you said, gives them something to complete as they're engaging with the content as well.
Great. This, just like the learning objective, is fully editable. So I can add, in here, or I might suggest an improvement. I might have a conversation with AI and, say, make this simpler. Maybe you don't want to make it simpler. Kids are capable of learning at a very high level, but, we could make this simpler and see how it looks. So I've just made it simpler, and it's the same ideas, just in a little bit simpler language.
A little more to the point. Yeah.
So the next element of this modern classroom lesson is, after students watch a video and take notes, they need to apply what they learn, right? Learning is an active process. And so what InstaleLesson will generate is 7 practice questions for students to answer. And those practice questions get more difficult, go to higher levels of thinking as you go on. So the first question, I'll just read it for people listening. Describe what no taxation without representation meant to the American colonists. By the time we get to question 6, imagine you are a colonist. Write a short paragraph explaining why you support or oppose the British taxes. So we're really trying to take students from the more basic understanding to a real, challenging, rewarding cognitive task in the space of a few questions. Danny, you're
Love
looking at
that.
all 7 questions. How do these look to you in terms of questions you might have asked your first year students?
Yeah, I like them, and I really appreciate you highlighting number 6 because that's just like that's empathy. That's putting their own experience into the shoes of another, right? Like if they're a colonist back during the Revolutionary War, and being able to synthesize and apply, everything they learned about the Revolutionary War and think about if they'd support or oppose. Fantastic. That could lead to a great discussion too, in class and a debate. And something that I realize is that you could turn that into an experience, a role play, a memory with these students because we don't remember the worksheets and all that kind of stuff. But when we're able to act things out and make it real, that's the learning that really sticks. So yeah, appreciate them all.
Great. And I got to say, I really love going through this process with people who are experts in their subject matter and what they taught, because I learn a lot from it. And I think that's really the goal of this AI tool. It's not just spit out a lesson and tell you to teach it. It's really meant to draw out the teacher's sort of knowledge and expertise for you to have this, apply your expertise to create an excellent lesson. The AI is really just a starting point here. So at this point, we've got a learning objective, we've got a video, we've got key points. Students are going to learn by practicing. The last thing we want is an exit ticket. And so the AI will take another look at that learning objective, the standard, the video, and ask a single exit ticket question. I'll read this just for people listening. According to the video, what was no taxation without representation? And how did it contribute to the start of the Revolutionary War? When I look at this, I don't love adding this according to the video. I don't want
Hmm.
students, just basing their understanding off according to the video. I want to just be able to ask what was no taxation without representation. So I'll just edit the question for the exit ticket. How does this look to you, Danny?
Yeah, looks good. Looks good. Appreciate
Great.
it.
So at this point, we're ready to send you the lesson, and I'll explain in a minute. All you need to get this lesson is just an email address. So you don't need to create an account, login, password, privacy stuff. You just need an email address. I'll just send it to myself here, rob@InstaleLesson.com. And
It does say log in though. So what does that unlock for you if you do create an account or something?
yeah, great question. So this tool, everything I've shown, everything I've talked about is totally free for teachers. And the idea is to give teachers a free tool that's really useful for lesson planning, sub plans, whatever they need it for. We do have some premium features, which are if you create an account and have a login, you can see all your lessons in one place. You can do additional sort of customization. So you can do curriculum alignment. You can provide additional context about your school or class. There's additional training and support. So there are some premium features, although but everything I've showed so far will be free, no account required. Let's see what happens when we create the lesson. One thing that I was really thinking about when I built InstaleLesson is a lot of AI tools, they give you interesting information. Something like a chat GPT gives you interesting information, but it's not necessarily useful right away. Like you might get a lot of output from chat GPT. You've still got to copy that, paste it into a worksheet, give it to your students, format it, all of these things. We sometimes talk about this last mile problem of taking the AI information, making it really useful. So let me show you here what I've created in just about 30 seconds. This is the student lesson. And what the student lesson is the student lesson is a 2-page Google Doc. It's meant to be printed or shared digitally, and it has a couple elements. It has the learning objective right on top. It has a way for students to watch the video. So it says I can go to ilesson.co and enter this code. I'll show you what happens if I do that. So if I go to this website here, and I'll share this tab instead, I now have the YouTube video that we selected together, but it's not on YouTube. where there would be all those different distractions and things that
Distractions.
could,
Yeah.
pull students away from their attention. It should, yep, it's just taking me a minute here, should show up right here. So here's the video we chose in a place that students can watch without distraction. Students will also, on this InstaleLesson sheet, there's a good space for them to take notes. Here are those key points we talked about.
Points. Yeah.
So students are going to make sure that before they, move off this page, they understand these key points. Here's the practice questions. And one thing that the directions make clear is that practice should be done with classmates. And so this sort of learning, although it might feel sort of personalized and individualized, it really is a social component to this that, students should be working together. So this is the student-facing thing that's created. If you give me a minute, I will pull up the teacher-facing document here, because I put in my email address, and let me just find what was emailed here. I'm just going to need to share a different window here. So by email, find where I was. Sorry. By email, I received this document. This is called the teacher guide. And this
Also
teacher
Google
guide
Doc.
has a ton of guidance on how you can implement this lesson. So here's the learning objective. Here's why this matters. Here is the sort of preparation, what teachers should do and what learners should do. Basically, teachers need to make sure they have the materials ready, and then learners should follow the materials. There are some tips for teaching this lesson, all generated by AI, but here are some anticipated challenges, and here's how you can respond to them. Here's how you could modify this lesson for multilingual learners. Some really concrete suggestions. I know that we have more and more multilingual learners in classrooms around the country these days. I think that's great. It does pose a challenge for teachers, and here are some suggestions. Here are some more creative activities. I love regular learning. I love learning in this way, but it might be fun to have a town meeting or have, a rap battle or something, just to spice up the learning. In addition,
For sure.
this lesson contains a warm-up. So here's a warm-up half sheet. You can print this out and pass it out to your students. There's an exit ticket. Same idea, printable, give this out to your students. Here's some additional practice. The modern classroom approach is all about mastery. So maybe students don't reach mastery the first time. Here's some additional practice for them. Here's an extension activity. It's that taxation rap battle. And then here's an answer key that gives answers for all the questions, the fill in the blanks, the practice, and the exit ticket. And then the last thing that InstaleLesson creates is actually a slide deck. And I will share this. And for those of you listening, I've just been sort of clicking through the things. You'll have to create your own InstaleLesson to see this for yourself. But here's a slide deck where there's a title slide, a warm-up, the learning objective. Here's that video if you want to show it full class. Here are the key points, the practice questions, the extension, and the exit ticket. And everything here, by the way, is fully editable. I want to change the colors. I want to change, anything I want. It's all fully editable. And the idea is AI is the starting point, but the real expert is the teacher or the coach or the administrator who's helping create this lesson. And so the idea is everything that's created should be fully editable for the teacher. So I know that was quite a long demo, but the goal is really create something that's free, easy, and comprehensive for teachers.
Well, I think, there was value going in depth. The people who engage in this content, they want to do school different. And this is a tool that makes that accessible and get you 80, 90% of the way there. And like you said, it's all editable. So if you want to add your own Ruckus Maker swagger to it, then you can, right? So yeah, really appreciate that. So encouraging Ruckus Makers to check out Modern Classrooms, play with InstaleLesson, grab the book too, meet every learner's needs. And that brings us to the last few questions, Rob. So If you could put a message on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would your message be?
I would say every student can achieve mastery and every student must. And that's really what this whole approach is all about, is getting students to reach true understanding. And students are capable of that. So often, I think in schools, we push students through the content because we've got to get through the content. And students kind of get it, but not really. And we have all these shortcuts. And I understand why that happens. We as educators want them to see all the content. We want them to be prepared for the next level. But I think, it's what I believe is it really matters that students achieve understanding, both because then they have the skills, but it builds self-esteem and self-confidence. And students, when they're pushed through content without understanding, they feel inadequate. When they're shown that with the right support, the right structure of class, they really can achieve mastery, it just builds their confidence. It builds success. It's a virtuous cycle. And so, yeah, every student can achieve mastery and must achieve mastery. That's what the goal of every teacher every day should be. We just need instructional models and tools that really orient students towards mastery.
If you could build your dream school route and there were no limitations in terms of resources, the only constraint was your ability to imagine, what would be the 3 guiding principles of your dream school?
Yeah, I mean, the first would be require mastery. So you don't move to lesson 2 until you understand lesson 1. You don't move to you don't move to grade 6 until you understand grade 5. And mastery would really be required. I think the second would be every learner has different needs. We need to meet every learner's needs. And so this means that students will inevitably move at different paces and they'll need different things from their teachers. And I think we need schools that don't just accommodate the sort of diversity of our learners, but are built around it and celebrate it and really, really respect the fact that every learner is different. And then I think the final principle would be that the key to real learning is human interaction. And so everything I've described today, its goal is to create classrooms where there's a lot of high quality interaction from student to student and teacher to student. You might think, InstaleLesson, it's AI planning, it's watching a video, that's kind of impersonal. That couldn't be farther from the truth. When your students are learning from a video, you are now free to sit down with them and really get to know them and have one-on-one interactions. When students are moving at their own pace, to practice questions, they can find a classmate to work on this together. You're not sort of controlling the room from the front of the room. And so everything is really about high quality interactions of teacher to student, student to student. And that is really the key at the heart of this towards pushing students to mastery. So require mastery, embrace that every learner is different and focus on human interaction.
Brilliant. So we covered a lot of ground today, Rob. And of everything we discussed, what's the one thing you want a Ruckus Maker to remember?
What I would like the Ruckus Maker to remember is that I think every day in every classroom, every student should be appropriately challenged and appropriately supported. And if we keep that as that North Star, every student appropriately challenged and appropriately supported, I think the modern classroom is a great way to do that. I think InstaleLesson is a great way to do that. Ruckus makers listening here might say, I've got an even better idea to do this. And I would say, awesome. Email me, let me know. I want to hear it. The real goal is every student appropriately challenged and appropriately supported every day.
Hey, Ruckus Maker, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I enjoyed recording it. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something for you, where you want to do school different or you have a new idea about education, then I want to invite you to subscribe to ruckusmakers.news. That's our newsletter. And you get 3 new opportunities to do school different every week sent to your inbox. It's trusted by over 5,000 school leaders. And if you want to reimagine education within a traditional setting so that you could create a campus experience worth showing up for, subscribe for free at ruckusmakers.news.